Pixar's magnum opus Toy Story, often regarded as a trailblazer in terms of the first of its kind in CGI evolution and computer animation, tells the story of a group of toys living in suburban America that come to life when humans aren't watching. We follow these toys as they navigate their purpose, roles, and identities as playthings, replaceable objects, collector's items, and, well, toys. The Toy Story franchise, with a fifth installment currently in development, has earned over $3.3 billion in worldwide revenue and has received 3 Academy Award nominations. Its enduring success lies in its exploration of themes such as identity, purpose, and consumption, examined through toys rather than humans. The first film focuses on the arrival of a new toy, Buzz Lightyear, who for a large chunk of the film actually believes himself to be a space ranger. When Buzz watches a TV advert for his line of toys, he suffers an identity crisis, questioning his purpose in life, which, by the end of the film, he comes to realize is to be there for Andy. In the second film, it's infallible cowboy Woody who suffers an identity crisis when he finds out he belongs to a rare collection of merchandise from an old-school discontinued TV series. In this movie, he is kidnapped by a collector who intends to sell him and the other toys in the collection to a museum in Japan where they will spend the rest of their lives being admired behind a glass case. Woody escapes from this fate by staying true to his belief that the purpose of a toy is to be played with rather than objectified as an artifact. The third film continues this exploration of identity and purpose as Andy, now 17, prepares to leave for college, forcing the toys to confront their uncertain futures. Andy spends this movie towing the line between seeing his toys as disposable playthings that he has outgrown and objects of sentimental value that remind him of his youth. By the end of the film, Andy decides to donate his toys to Bonnie, a young neighbor, giving them a new lease of life and a renewed sense of purpose. It seems clear then that there is much more to these toys than their primary role as playthings. As mentioned in my Monsters Inc. video, Pixar's success and universality lies in their ability to take complex issues or emotions and make them palatable for a general audience. In the Toy Story films, issues such as identity, purpose, and consumption are interestingly explored through the adventures of Buzz and Woody. Exploring complex themes and emotions through everyday items is what distinguishes Pixar films from other production houses. In Toy Story, we can evaluate the themes of replaceability, consumerism, and newness by taking a look at the ways in which the toys regard themselves, as well as the ways in which they are utilized by the humans in the film. Let's start with Andy. Living with his mum, sister, and dog, Andy lives comfortably in a middle-class suburban household. Despite being a single mother, Andy's mum has enough of a disposable income to purchase new toys for Andy and his sister every birthday and Christmas, buying into the consumerist attitudes of the mid-90s marked by factors such as globalization and technological advancements. Andy, like many kids his age, views toys as disposable playthings, objects he uses to fuel his fantasies of himself as a cowboy or astronaut, only to dispose of them once his imagination runs out of fuel or changes its course. We see this change through the ways in which his bedroom is decorated in the films, which at first is filled with Western memorabilia, only to be redesigned later on in the film with Buzz Lightyear merchandise when he buys into the Buzz Lightyear hype. This type of consumerism is called upselling, and it relates to the purchasing of add-ons to the primary purchase. Andy's mum's primary purchase is the Buzz Lightyear toy, and the add-on purchases would be the Buzz Lightyear merchandise, such as posters and bed covers, which she purchases on behalf of Andy to complement and validate his love for the toy. Due to his young age and his inability to foster long-lasting and sentimental relationships with objects, Andy treats his toys as disposable. When a trendier toy arrives, or when a toy is broken or lost, or when it loses its spark for him, he discards it or completely forgets about it. Take Wheezy, for example, a once-beloved toy who now lies abandoned behind Andy's desk after his squeaker stopped working. We see the same attitude with Jessie's human Emily, who discards Jessie as she grows out of her love for horses. Unlike Emily, as Andy grows older, his toys continue to hold a sentimental value for him, arguably more so than when he was a child. As Andy gets ready to leave for college in the third film, He decides to store his toys in the attic, with the exception of Woody, whom he decides to take to college with him as a reminder of his youth. However, at the end of the film, in a poignant moment, he decides against storing the toys in the attic and donates them to his young neighbor Bonnie, thus extending their purpose as playthings, ensuring they continue to serve their purpose. Let's move on to talk about Andy's mum and her habit of buying things, only to later get rid of them. In the movies, Andy's mum purchases items to celebrate birthdays and holidays. Buzz was purchased to celebrate Andy's birthday. We can assume that this was the case for most of the toys in Andy's possession. Even the family dog was purchased to celebrate a holiday. The accumulation of things therefore kickstarts the cycle of getting rid of them to make space for more things. In the second film, irritated by the amount of toys in Andy's bedroom, Andy's mum has a yard sale, getting rid of things Andy no longer plays with. On a rescue mission to rescue one of these toys, Woody accidentally ends up getting stolen by a collector. To summarize, if Andy's mum represents a typical middle-class consumer, then she also represents an attempt to deal with this side of herself by getting rid of the same stuff that she buys, so much so that in the third film, the main conflict is caused by Andy's mum, who accidentally throws away the bag of toys which were intended for the attic. Unlike Andy's mum, the collector in Toy Story 2 represents the opposite, a conscious consumer who values toys for their rarity rather than their sentimental value. As a children's toy collector, a suburban yard sale is exactly the type of place he would frequent with the intention of finding a gem off of which he could profit momentarily. This is where he comes across Woody. Instantly, he is able to see Woody's value and potential as a collector's item rather than as a children's toy. We are able to see this through the careful way in which he handles Woody, which completely contrasts with the roughness with which he is handled by the children in the film up till now. We don't know much about the collector, except for the fact that he works at a toy store, which means that he is constantly surrounded by mass-produced toys, all of which have no long-term value. Though popular at one point, the Woody line has since been discontinued and so can't be purchased at retail toy stores, thus increasing the attraction and value of Woody. These are exactly the sort of toys the collector is on the hunt for. Extra points if the toy is in mint condition, like Stinky Pete, who supposedly has never left his box. The reason mint items like Stinky Pete are highly valued are because they represent newness. Unlike Woody, who views being boxed as the worst tragedy that could ever befall a toy since it strays from what he believes to be a toy's value, being played with, Stinky Pete takes pride in the mint condition, equating it with higher value, thus buying into the cult of newness. However, what Stinky Pete's radicalization of newness also buys him is an acceptance of his own imprisonment. In Toy Story 3, Bonnie and her mother provide a refreshing contrast to the cycle of consumerism. Rather than buying new toys, they embrace the idea of giving pre-loved toys a second chance. We're first introduced to Bonnie and her mother at Sunnyside, the preschool Bonnie's mother works at, which is where Andy's mum decides to donate all of Andy's old toys. Sunnyside runs on second-hand donations because it's the only economical solution to just how quickly the children go through toys. When Bonnie first encounters Woody, he is dangling from a tree, having just escaped from Sunnyside. Bonnie is charmed by his catchphrases and decides to take him home despite at first finding it strange that a cowboy toy should come without a cowboy hat. Despite this imperfection, she takes him home. This heavily contrasts with Andy's behavior in Toy Story 2 when he refuses to take Woody to camp after noticing his torn arm. Unlike Andy, Bonnie's capacity to love her toys transcends superficial qualities like newness or perfection. Bonnie's love for her toys isn't driven by trends or marketing, but by the potential she sees in them to inspire creativity. Take Forky, for example, a toy Bonnie crafts out of trash and grows to love. Her acceptance of her toys' flaws symbolizes a break from the cycle of consumerism, where objects are discarded as soon as they lose their novelty, making her the perfect owner to replace Andy. The qualities that Bonnie looks for in toys are their potential as facilitators in her imagination. When Bonnie takes Woody home, The screenplay takes a considerable amount of time to show us how Bonnie plays with Woody. In other words, how Woody facilitates Bonnie's imagination. Bonnie centers her scenario around Woody's status as a cowboy. She simulates a scene where external forces threaten her and her toys and allows Woody to rescue them, leaning into his status as a sheriff. This scene is also necessary as it works to soothe Woody's anxieties of never being played with again. This scene shows us that despite Andy's growing lack of interest in playtime, their purpose can still be achieved if Woody learns to let go of Andy and allow himself to be taken in by a new child, which is exactly what is achieved at the end of the film. At the end of Toy Story 3, Andy is reunited with his old toys and decides to give them away to Bonnie. As he drives up to the home, we see Bonnie playing in the front garden with her toys, while her mum is in the background tending to her gardens and growing things. Yet another example of their organic, self-reliance and consumerless lifestyles. Andy introduces each toy to Bonnie and the two engage in a final playtime together, with Andy taking the lead in setting up the play scenario to include a role for each toy. This makes for a bittersweet ending, as Andy is all grown up and toys no longer have a purpose in his life except for their sentimental value as reminders of his youth. Andy even plans on taking Woody to college with him as a reminder of home, but then decides against it at the end when he takes a final look at Woody and remembers all of the fun times he had playing with him as a child. In this moment, Woody and Andy's belief that a toy's purpose in life is to be played with coincides, and Andy hands over Woody to Boo, giving him a new lease of life. Let's talk about Sid. Just as Bonnie crafts toys in her image, so does Sid. However, Bonnie's creativity is presented as a positive, whereas Sid's evil, because he harms the toys. Sid is probably the most impulsive out of all the children in his playtime, and this probably has to do with the fact that he's the oldest out of the children in the movies, and so toys just don't cut it for him anymore. He needs more simulation, which is why he takes a more creative approach to playtime and focuses on creating toy hybrids instead of playing with the toys as they're meant to be played with. We can see this in the way that Sid refers to Woody as a wimpy cowboy doll and engages in a scenario where Woody is a hostage, which falls out of line with how Andy and Bonnie play with Woody, leaning into his morally superior status as a sheriff, often engaging in play scenarios where cowboy Woody saves the day. If Andy and his family represent a consumerist attitude, and Bonnie and her mum an anti-consumerist one, then Sid probably falls somewhere in the middle of these two camps. His impulsiveness means that he is susceptible to consumerism and likely to desire the hot new toy in the market, as can be seen by his excitement at winning a Buzz and Woody at the claw machine. However, his creativity means that even if he never purchased a new toy in his life again, he would still find a way to fuel his imagination, i.e. building his own toys, which we see him do many times in the film. Let's move on to talk about how the toys feel about being objects of consumption. In Hannah Jorgensen's comprehensive essay, Thing Theory and Consumerism in Children's Film, she notices that the toys in the film don't want to be animated, but rather want their actions to be dictated by another being. Therefore, part of the labor of being a toy seems to be giving up agency. The moment where they have the least agency are the moments where the toys are the most fulfilled. This is certainly true for all of the toys in the movie, even the most autonomous and power-hungry toys such as Lotso. They are the happiest and most fulfilled when they assume the role of passive plaything and give over their agency to the humans that is playing with them. However, it's important to also keep in mind that the toys are precious about how they're played with. In Toy Story 3, the toys in the caterpillar room hate the way they are roughly handled by children that are too young to understand how to play with them. This is contrasted with the butterfly room, which is a classroom that Lotso and his gang of cronies have monopolized, where much older children understand how to play with the toys because they are able to assign the correct role to the toy. For example, since Lotso is a teddy bear, the older children are able to assign him the role of comforter and know to cuddle him. In another frame, we see a young girl play with Barbie and Ken. She understands the way in which Ken and Barbie are marketed as girlfriend and boyfriend, and so leans into their status as lovers and makes them kiss. It is not just the children that use the way in which toys are marketed to understand how to play with them, but the toys themselves attribute their worth and identities with how they are marketed by the corporations that make them. Take the line said by Mr. Potato Head after being ravaged by Andy's little sister.
Ages 3 and up. It's on my box. Ages 3 and up.
Or some of the scenes where the boy toys such as Woody and Buzz are hijacked by young girls such as Bonnie or Sid's sister to engage in stereotypically feminine scenarios such as tea parties, which is often played for laughs since it doesn't adhere with how these toys should be played with. Arguably, the biggest example of the effects of marketing on identity can be seen in Toy Story 1 when Buzz finds out that he is not actually a space ranger after seeing an advert for his toy line. Up until this point in the film, Buzz is certain that he is indeed a space ranger sent on a special mission to colonize the planet of Andy's bedroom. When Buzz finds out he's a toy, he suffers an existential crisis and doubts his value and reason for existing. Instead of working out a way to escape, he is willing to succumb to his fate. It is only when Woody explains to Buzz that his value as Andy's toy supersedes anything else that Buzz reassesses his existentialism and helps Woody to plan their escape. For Woody and Andy, their sense of belonging and their duty of care to Andy is what justifies their existence. It would be remiss to talk about the cult of newness, capitalism, and the power of marketing in the film without exploring its effect on the audience. As Jorgensen explains, the movie works to make us feel good about buying toys because the toys we buy might be just like the ones in the movie. They might love us just like the ones in the movie loved Andy. Therefore, the movie becomes an elaborate form of marketing. The creation of a franchise to not only entertain and delight, but to spawn a whole line of merchandise to be purchased becomes Disney's way to milk the franchise as much as it can. As well as being fantastic pieces of work, trailblazers in the world of animation, Disney and Pixar are essentially well-crafted adverts whose main goals are to humanize everyday objects such as toys and teacups and cars and lamps, with the intention of manipulating an audience to view these objects as things one is capable of forming a genuine relationship with, which would then lead to the purchase of merchandise through which we can replicate our love for the films and the characters. Take a child who believes that purchasing a Woody toy means that they are also buying Woody's love and devotion. And finally, when we realize that we are the victims of marketing and capitalism, that we are the consumers that Pixar are selling to, we too are made to feel like Buzz when he realizes that he is a product, a cog in a larger machine. When the audience realizes this, the fourth wall is broken. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more film content. Bye.